Hello and welcome to the Single Malt Frontier, where we explore the edge of innovation in American single malt whiskey. Here on the show, we do a little bit of tasting and a lot of talking. Usually we talk about whiskey, but the best thing about whiskey is the conversations that we get to have along the way, and we get to talking about a little bit of everything. I'm your host, Doug, or as I'm known around the internet, Demi Tastes. I'm joined today, as usual, and again, after a short break, by my co-host, Phil, of the Ranger's Respite. And today is something we don't do too often, which is that we are going to, since Phil was out with the flu from our interview, I'm saying the flu, maybe it wasn't the flu, but Phil was out with the flu or something equivalent for our interview with Ryan Lintz about River Roots Barrel Company. So he was not able to taste through the set of samples that we had. So we decided as a compromise that we would follow up with an episode where we do taste through these samples so that we can sort of talk about the tasting notes together and really dig into that aspect of these samples, which is really interesting, which is we have two sets of samples, and in each set, they are exactly the same thing, distilled on the same day, same mash bill, all the same good stuff. And the only difference between them is the barrel that they were in. So medium toast, heavy toast, char number 1, char number 3 are the options that we're working with. So that's what we're going to be tasting through. So this is going to be a bit of a challenge. We're going to try to do it quick today because we need to take every opportunity we can to learn how to be briefer for lots of reasons. And also because I have a hard stop today. So I'm the one with a schedule constraint. So I don't want to rush it, but I don't want to drag on forever either. Maybe we'll get into some side conversations. Phil, do you want to start with the 7-year or the 13-year set?
Let's go ahead and start with the 13-year set because that's what I poured because I was like, let's start with set 1.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
So that means I don't have to pause to pour.
Cool. Well, I will have to pause to pour, but since I've already given my thoughts on air, sorry, I was talking away from the microphone. I will have to pause to pour, but since I've already given my thoughts on air, I will sort of at some point I will take a break and let you talk, and I'll pour my samples. Before we do that, I just want to sort of let our audience know about some stuff that's going on in the whiskey calendar, so to speak. So the American Craft Spirits Association Conference 2025 is happening in Tucson, Arizona, home of Whiskey Del Bach. I'm going. I will be visiting Whiskey Del Bach and hanging out with Mark. I will be going to the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission meeting that happens because we are gonna party this year. The American Single Malt Whiskey got ratified. It happened, and everybody's going to be super excited. There's going to be changes in the landscape of American single malt whiskey. I strongly suspect we're going to see a lot of whiskey brands that have been sitting on American single malt waiting to see what the regulation would be before they start releasing products. I have a feeling we're going to start seeing a lot of products from those people. It's going to be interesting to see what the long-standing brands in the category, the members of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission, have to say about that or what their perspectives are on things. And also just like being there in the party vibe. You've probably, if you've listened to enough podcasts, you've heard about the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission and their meetings, and the fact that it tends to be a whole lot of people who largely agree with each other getting together once a year to make sure that everything's on track and then basically have a party. They do a bottle share. There's lots of people trying each other's products that don't necessarily get a chance in other contexts. I know last year I learned about no fewer than 10 brands of American single malt whiskey that I just had not heard of, which I want to say I'm pretty good at doing my research, but there are over 200 of them. So, and even just in the commission list, right, you could read all of the names and just not have time to research everybody who's on that list. And then even if you do, the names that stay with you, you know, human brains need connections. I need whiskey to taste or somebody to talk to before I really hold on to information about something. Or a brand is just really damn interesting, and then I might hold on to some information about that brand. Other things that are happening. Joseph O'Sullivan has informed me, this is going to be brand new news to you, Phil. I just texted with him like 2 hours ago. Joseph O'Sullivan has informed me that he has, I'll go ahead. I'll put this in non-absolute terms at least. Basically, the brakes are coming off, and in terms of he's done the media training, the company is giving him a little bit more leeway in what he is able to say in public, and so he has asked me to schedule him for an appearance on our show to do the follow up to the episode that we haven't published yet, which is we talked about the brand, and this follow up is we're going to talk about the real products that got released to market and do tasting notes with Joe. And we may end up just doing a big old retake on the whole thing because Joe has practiced the marketing angle on this particular brand as well. So that's going to be fun. That's not scheduled yet. Stranahan's I'm working on scheduling. We never published that holiday special. I feel bad. I have my life got very busy and I have not had time to edit. And what I'm thinking at the moment is I'll release it when it's done, and then I'll re-release it in December this year, assuming that there's not any particularly dated information in there, and call it good.
Mhm.
I think that's realistically all I can do. I'm taking a perspective that this podcast needs to jump down a couple of notches in my priority list right now. So I only want to do what feels good, what feels fun. I don't want to do the whole hustle and build out the social media presence. Like I don't want to do things to please the algorithm. I want to do things that make me happy. And so I'm going to do what feels good and do what feels fun, and trust that the audience appreciates what we're doing. Did you see that message about the rum barrels?
I did not.
Hey, update. I just found out that there are about 3 cases of the McCarthy's barrel pick left. That is, what episode was that? There's a link in the description to the episode that talks about it. There's a lot of other resources on the blog and all that other good stuff. They went really fast at first. Like the first 80 to 100 bottles went really fast. And we're sort of, I guess we're sort of ramping up the marketing to a broader audience. So
Yes.
may not stay sitting at that level for very much longer. If I hadn't already bought enough bottles for me and for all of the gifts I would ever want to give of them, and then also did not have a need to change my budget up a little bit so that I can't just go splurge on whiskey constantly all the time anymore, I would be buying more, because it's getting to that point now where it's like I've had a taste. I know exactly how much I like it, which is a lot. It was my favorite whiskey of 2024, and not just because I picked it. Rather, I picked it because it genuinely was going to be a contender for my favorite whiskey of 2024. So when you get a whiskey like that is super rare spec, not going to come around very often.
Mhm.
We know that was the last barrel of that particular thing, so it would be at least 6 years again before we had another 6-year rum cask, if that were ever to happen. Truly a rarity, sort of thing that if you like it, you buy more. So if you like it, buy more.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
genuinely considering buying myself at least one more bottle because I've given a couple away. Yes, pens. I do have pens. That one is made from Wild Turkey barrel stave. I've got some on the way that are made from an as of yet undisclosed American single malt distillery. They are made from French oak as opposed to American white oak. But I'm excited about that. I'm excited to get them listed. As always, links will be in the description down below. That is one of the ways that you can support our channel and help take a little bit of the strain off of making these episodes. And on a totally unrelated note, that is also, I guess, self-promotion. I believe we are also in talks to try to get another Virginia distiller on the show, which I am excited about, personally.
Am I just blanking? Oh, yes.
Because
I am
Kentucky
just blanking.
released the malt whiskey.
Yeah. To say we're in talks is I have sent one Instagram message and received a positive Instagram message in response. I need to send an email and start setting it up. But yes,
it's talks. It's
happening. It's talks.
I'm excited. probably everybody who's watching this or will watch this will know that anytime somebody is like, oh, what's a good American whiskey, or asks for a rye recommendation, my go-to recommendation is Catoctin Creek. Of course, the only bottles that I have within easy reach at the moment are Rebel Rouser and their new malt whiskey release. Uh-oh. An easy reach is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. Hey, fair enough. I've got. Hey, is that easy reach? I got to stand up to go over there. Same with over there. I have stuff you can't see over here that is kind of an easy reach. I have stuff you can't see over here that is kind of an easy reach. The march of progress of the floor whiskey is a very real and dangerous thing.
I have thus far avoided floor whiskey, but I have instead every conceivable surface whiskey. The top of my mini fridge, my TV stand. I
Yep.
can't turn on my TV with the remote because there are bottles blocking the sensor. I promise I'm working on building out new shelves so that I will be able to access everything easily. But in the meantime, I suppose we should start talking about River Roots. So I don't actually know a whole lot about the brand because I usually go into these episodes fairly blind unless it's a brand that I already know, because I find that that's a good way to sort of guide the conversation towards things that, if I have done my research, I might not think to ask, but our audience might want to know.
Exactly. And that's why I like having a co-host, because I, as the sort of host, the person inviting the brands, and so on, almost always have done, even accidentally, some amount of essentially extensive research about a brand. We try not to invite brands on that we don't like, because we want to be able to say good things, right? We don't want to have somebody on and then tell them we don't like anything about them. That would be a horrible. That would just make us feel bad. That would make everybody feel
Yeah.
bad. Nobody wants that. So yeah, having a co-host and why I really appreciate Phil, who has a lot of expertise in whiskey. I mean, we've been doing this show for over a year.
Yeah.
A year and a quarter, coming up on a year and a half. And so at this point, you're fairly expert on American single malt. I think you were when we started too. But still, to say somebody who is relatively less expert on American single malt as a co-host is good, because we get that, like, essentially you represent the audience. I don't want to be talking to people who know as much or more than I do. That would defeat the purpose. I want to be talking to people who want to know what we can offer. And so, yeah. I hope I don't mix up the order. I shouldn't mix up the order of these, but since
Right.
you started, it's the set of 4 13-year-olds, right?
Yep. So while Doug's pouring those, I'm going to get a jump start on my thoughts on our first sample, which is barrel number 503, which is a medium toast. 13 years old. You wouldn't happen to know the proof on this off the top of your head, would you?
Not off the top of my head, but I do have the list of samples that I'm gonna pull up in just a second here, because I sent it to you earlier,
Mhm.
and then I generate so many documents when I'm like researching and announcing these shows. It gets hard to find things sometimes. And I'm fairly organized with them, even as it is. Yeah. Okay. So sample number 1, barrel number 503. These 4 samples, by the way, same mash bill. First of all, let's talk about what they have in common. The mash bill is 76.3% malted barley, 23.7% malted rye, distilled on March 15th, 2021. It's 13 years old. I received them in somewhere around like June 2024. So we know that they're at least 13 years old, but we don't know it down to the month.
Mhm.
The barrel entry proof on all of these is 130.4. I want to see if you caught that.
Barrel entry proof 130.4.
Yes, that's what's written on the paper. I neglected to clarify that particular point with Ryan. I think I should send a follow-up email. I
Hmm.
think it's possible that's a typo. And the reason why is that
That
I,
would.
I if these are marketed as malt whiskey, that would be a violation, but the TTB
Mhm.
would have stopped them. So because the maximum barrel entry proof is 125
Mhm.
for most of the styles of whiskey, with the exception of light whiskey and just the catch-all American whiskey, it's fine. Any distillation proof is fine. The other interesting thing about these, actually, I'm going to save this. If you don't already know, I'm going to save this particular observation until you give me some tasting notes. So barrel 503 is the first one you're tasting, and that
Mhm.
is a medium toast barrel. It's been aged in a medium toast barrel its whole life.
It is. It's got lots of sweetness. Initially on the nose, I got a lot of like the sweet barrel notes, the like caramel, a little bit of vanilla, like honey, and like just a remarkably little amount of barrel astringency, that sort of like bitey, um, oaky taste, and not a whole lot of grain character, which, to be honest, isn't terribly surprising for a 13-year-old whiskey. Um, on the palate, however, it is a totally different seeming animal. It's fairly low on oils, so it doesn't really stick to the inside of the mouth like I expect it to. It's got sort of a hint of the mentally minty note that I get from some ryes, and it's got just a little bit of cereal grain note and a lot of like very strong floral and cut vegetation and greenness to it.
Okay, a couple of questions for you right off the bat.
Mhm.
Does that flavor profile remind you of anything?
Yes, it does.
Okay, what do you
I
got?
believe a whiskey that I had a sample of that was bottled by Lost Lantern, and I think Mountain Meadow. I'd have to look at my.
Okay, just to be clear, did I prompt you to say that at all?
No,
I'm
and I'm.
so happy that you went there. That isn't even,
It's
I mean,
got
that
a
is,
note that
yeah.
that I've only ever really gotten from the Mountain Meadow.
Okay. What do you know about Mountain Meadow?
I know that it came from a California distillery. I can't remember which.
St.
Um,
George.
St. George. Okay. See, I was thinking St. George, but I couldn't remember. I remember it being sort of an interesting edge case because it wasn't, strictly speaking, American single malt somehow.
Okay, we'll get into that. It is 100% malted barley and it is labeled American single malt because the TTB gave them that
Okay.
label and they got grandfathered in. The reason that it is maybe not technically American single malt, depending on how you interpret the rules, and this is a bit of a gray area. Opinions vary.
Mhm.
Um, I got to do my whole soapbox about this during the Ryan interview, so I'm not going to repeat that now in the interest of time. Um, it is because it was distilled from a hopped ready to bottle beer.
Gotcha.
Because pre-distillation it contains something other than water, yeast, and the grains, that being
Right.
hops, a
Yeah.
flavoring agent, if you like, a
Hmm.
bittering agent at the very least. Um, there is an argument to be made that that is not whiskey
Hmm.
exactly, quote unquote whiskey.
Because
It
hops isn't a grain.
because hops isn't a grain. And another interpretation of the rules is that, well, you know, you can put yeast in and yeast is not a grain, and that's not part of the mash bill. So maybe there's other things that should be allowed in the mash bill that aren't grains, and you could still call it 100% malted barley, and you could still call it whiskey. There's just something else in the mash bill. Is a little bit of a gray area.
Yeah.
I've done some reading of the rules, and I'm not, I feel like it could be argued either way. So here's the quick version. There's essentially 3 ways to be a hopped whiskey, or a whiskey with hop flavors.
Right.
One is it's a ready to bottle beer that has hops in the mash, and then you distill that. That feels to me so whiskey adjacent that it might as well be whiskey, colloquially speaking, even if it's technically, according to the rules, maybe not. 2 is you add hops flavoring or hops after the fact, after distillation, and then it becomes very clearly a flavored whiskey, a hop flavored whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think, falls into whatever category flavor whiskey falls into, generally distilled specialty spirit that happens to have something related to whiskey or bourbon or something in its fanciful name, so that you can still market that it originated as whiskey of some sort. Number 3 is you start with whiskey, and then you put it in a barrel that held a hopped beer for a finishing. And then you get those hop flavors, and that came from a barrel finish. And that is every bit as okay as any other type of barrel finish, right? Those are the 3 ways to have a hop flavored whiskey. One of these, I think, is clearly inferior as far as how much do I think it's whiskey. Right. That would be option number 2, that hop flavoring or hops were added after distillation. The third option, the barrel finished whiskey, is every bit as much whiskey as any other barrel finished whiskey. And for American single malt, this isn't American single malt, but for American single malt, since any type of cask is allowed, it is absolutely 100% American single malt that has been finished in a beer cask.
Right. And you could age an American single malt entirely in an ex-beer cask.
Yes, you could. And you could get all that hop flavor. If that's a flavor profile that you target and desire, you could get all that hop flavor in there. By the way, I really appreciate that the Trillium guys, despite being beer makers, have committed to not putting hops in their American single malt. I just want to call that out. This, no sponsored anything anywhere, but credit where credit is due. Just because somebody's a beer maker doesn't mean they're going to make a beer and then distill it and call it an American single malt. They're going to treat the spirit the way it needs to be treated to make the best possible spirit. I really appreciate that about them. So the first option, a little bit of a gray area, and Mountain Meadow is in that gray area. TTB gave them the label. They were grandfathered in. I don't know what's going to happen now that the official language has been ratified, but as far as I'm concerned, nothing has changed. I don't know what TTB is going to do. But Mountain Meadow and the St. George single malts are made from hopped beer. And they are one of the ways to have a hopped American single malt or a hopped whiskey. This option number 1 with the hops, I mean, we're still talking about the same thing. With the hops in the mash, right? It's a kind of a gray area for me. I'm willing to say that's whiskey. I'm willing to go along with whatever TTB says. The thing that I want
there is consistency, because anybody who has interfaced at all with the TTB knows that consistency is not their strong suit.
Consistency can be a problem, yes. And transparency to some extent. If they're not asking this question, did you have hops in the wash? They might not get an answer. Right. And then it might not end up on the label. And that to me feels like possibly a problem, because here's the thing. You tasted exactly what I wanted you to taste without me telling you what this was.
Yeah.
You tasted that it tasted the same as only one other whiskey that you know, or it's one of very few whiskeys that you know, which is Mountain Meadow, which happens to be a hopped whiskey.
And this is making me want to revisit some whiskeys that I'm going to have to send you samples of pretty soon.
Yeah,
because I have a handful of whiskeys distilled from beers, all from the same distiller, that don't have as strong a note of hoppiness to it.
Yeah, and then there's another, and you have a bunch of samples from them. I've sent you a bunch of samples of Westward. Westward, according to Jonathan Harris during that interview that we did with Jonathan and Anna, Westward at one point in time in the past, at least, used to put hops in the still, or something along those lines. There were hops in the process before the distilled spirit for some of their stuff because they were making beer recipes and distilling it into whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do that anymore. Want to be absolutely clear about that. They don't do that
Mm-hmm.
anymore. I got clarification on that. They might never have done it, and that might have just been a misunderstanding. I don't remember whether I asked that question specifically or whether somebody mentioned that to me offhand. I'm sort of remembering that like maybe that wasn't actually ever true. But like we're not talking about a ton of hops. We're not talking about really trying to make a beer whiskey. But like it's interesting that American single malt whiskey especially. This is one reason why I think even though this is let's just be totally clear, this is American malt whiskey, not American single malt whiskey, because it is a majority malted barley, but it also has malted rye in it. That malted rye component is interesting. The beer component is interesting to the conversation here. Here's why I think that's interesting to American single malt whiskey. Craft brewing and craft American single malt share a lineage. There are a lot of producers of American single malt whiskey that used to come from a brewing background.
Mm-hmm.
And even among those who don't necessarily come from a brewing background, that brewing philosophy is still applied to the American single malt whiskey. So whether hopped whiskey is a staple of this category or not, and that's sort of I wanted to. I didn't know how I felt about this a year ago. The hopped whiskey question. I knew all these details. I did a ton of research, and I was hoping to come to the conclusion, no, this is totally okay. Oh, by the way, nice Trillium, Glencairn.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to come to the conclusion that this is okay, and then I wanted to do a big op-ed write-up in support of the idea that certain whiskeys, like certain American single malts, should be allowed to be hopped whiskey, and that's a product that should be able to exist on the market. And what I was left with after all that research is, I am not sure. And after a lot more research and time had passed, like I think there's validity to the idea that quote, this isn't whiskey, if you want to take the inflammatory statement, right? This isn't whiskey is an inflammatory statement that is technically true because distilled spirit specialty is a possible categorization of this type of product. However, there's enough of these products that have been released to market under the label whiskey that it's clear that TTB is to some extent okay with that. Often enough that it doesn't seem like a mistake. Maybe that's going to change. I don't know. Do I want that to change? I'm not sure. At this point, I'm just giving you facts. Like, form your own opinions. But here's what I think is absolutely true. Phil picked out a core element of the flavor profile that aligned with a whiskey that before today, there's nothing like it that we've tasted. I mean, for me, I've tasted all these River Roots products, but like, as of the time I tasted Mountain Meadow, nothing else I had ever had tasted like that. Like, not even close. Like, is it in the realm of whiskey? I don't, yeah, but like Mountain Meadow also kind of tastes like it could be distilled mead, right? Like it tastes categorically different. And that's where and it's like, I don't know if all the examples are necessarily.
Note
Sorry?
That there is that one little note that just pokes through.
It pokes way through, right? So it's most of the flavor profile. If you dig past that note, most of the flavor profile is still, okay, this is American single malt whiskey. I am on board with that. I mean, in the case of Mountain Meadow, right here, again, we're talking about American malt whiskey, which is close, but not exactly. Right. Like you dig past that and you go like, okay, if I dig past those notes, I can now officially ignore the hops and the rest of this tastes like whiskey. But that little edge of that flavor profile, that citrusy, dank, resinous thing that hops do in IPAs, if you've had an IPA, you know what this tastes like. Especially Citra hops, right? Like this tastes like Citra hops to me, like the really like Skittles and floral, fruity, like
the more in your face sort of like, I don't want to say skunky because that's sort of a like derogatory, but it's got that edge to it, and then that sweetness and the floral.
Yep. So that's there. It's very noticeable. It's a common piece of DNA between this product, which isn't even American single malt, from a California distillery. So okay, still California. Similar climate, We'll talk about what I think it is in a second. St. George and okay, let's just talk about it now. So River Roots only gets their malt whiskey from one distillery. Because of other products on the market and a bunch of research that I did about California distilleries, and things that I've heard from other people about this particular flavor profile, I am like 95% sure this is Charbay, which exclusively distills, as far as I can tell, hopped wash whiskeys. They distill ready to drink beer into whiskey. That's what they do. That is their product portfolio. I was hoping that there was more nuance to it, like, oh, just because River Roots is getting their stuff from one distillery, maybe they have stuff that's like actually American single malt that doesn't have hops in it. But as far as I can tell, all the products are a blend of grains, not 100% malt, and have hops in them. I wasn't able to confirm the existence of any 100% malt or any unhopped whiskey from them, and I have other reasons to believe it's very likely to be Charbay. Fairly certain that's what River Roots Malt Whiskey is. Fairly certain it's Charbay. Okay, so Charbay and St. George, both in California, similar aging profiles, similarly used hop whiskey. There's a lot in common here between them. It makes sense they taste kind of the same.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's other products to confirm that this piece of common DNA, the hopped whiskey thing, is a flavor profile that is distinct. And it's distinct in the way that peat is distinct. If a Scotch has peat in it, you know it has peat in it. Unless it's just minuscule quantities where you just barely can't pick it up. Like Glenfiddich might be that, like 2-3 ppm. Most of the time, if it has peat in it, you absolutely know it has peat in it. I just blind identified a Springbank last night. That it was actually a long row, but I thought it was a Springbank. That's pretty damn close.
I mean, technically speaking, they are.
It is, yeah. It is Springbank, right? Long Row is from Springbank. It's just that Long Row has slightly more peat, and they have different bottlings. This was, in particular, it was a Long Row Red. It was fun. I recorded a video. I don't know if I'm going to release that video because it was rambly, just like this one is becoming. We're half an hour in, and we've only talked about one whiskey. Let's move on to the.
Let me speed run the other three in this set.
Yeah, because it is the same whiskey, just different barrels. And now we get into the interesting aspect of let's add something to this conversation. Now we didn't really get into with Ryan. What do the different barrels bring to exactly the same thing?
The heavy toast, in my personal opinion, to my taste buds, it seems to darken, and you get more of the dark, heavy, rich caramel notes. You get more of the like dense sugariness. But it also seems like that sort of offsets a lot of the original character of the spirit, so it is sort of a weirdly very sweet dram. Not that that's bad, but that it's different.
Yep, I agree with all that.
Number 507, which is the number one char, is on the nose. You've got more of that dusty, charcoaly notes that you expect from char and from American whiskey, particularly one that has spent as much time as this has in the barrel.
By the way, I noticed that our audience has grown a little bit, so I want to throw out a request I didn't make earlier. We are talking to Balcones about coming to talk on the show. Balcones is now owned by Diageo, and so Jared Himstead didn't talk to me directly. I sent an email to Jared Himstead, who I've interviewed before. It's an unreleased audio-only episode. It was meant to be book research before we had a podcast, and I haven't figured out if I want to or whether or how to release that. Anyway, I sent an email to Jared. Jared routed me directly to their PR firm. This makes sense because they're owned by Diageo now. And they want a list of pre-submitted questions. So if you have questions for Diageo, please leave them in the comments or leave them in the chat, and we will add those to the list. It's going to be the usual set of questions, essentially. And I I have the interview before to pull from, and what I really want to know, I'm going to tease at like how are things different under Diageo, and like their pivot from a diversified portfolio to one that is exclusively American single malt. That's a thing that happened. And also, how things have changed or are changing for them in the wake of American single malt being ratified. So those are some of the questions that we're going to ask them about. But I want to know what you want to know from them. They want all the questions pre-submitted. Maybe we'll get away with asking some questions that sort of come naturally out of the conversation, but I don't think we'll be able to get away with asking questions from the live chat. So make sure you pre-submit those. Okay, cool. Back to you, Phil.
So, sample number 3 on the palate. It is, you definitely get a sense of what that char does. It's knocked down some of the volatiles, some of the like, not necessarily off notes, but it's knocked down some of that like the oily resinous flavors that you get, and it's made it strangely a little bit lighter seeming and less sweet.
That was char number 1.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I forgot that I had moved from the heavy toast to the char number 1. To me, they're fairly similar.
They are. I think it's darker in like color, like in terms of like flavor, which coincides with the heavier toast. But
I don't know if this is not working to show the color on the stream.
Let's see if I can.
I think char number 1 is a darker color ever so slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that it is, but I mean, like in terms of like the palate,
The flavor profile, yeah.
Yeah. Char number 3 is the one that I find the most interesting, the most drastic change.
Okay.
Because on the nose, it loses a lot of the like bright floral and the like vanilla and lighter honey notes from the light the medium and heavy toast. But
Yep. By the way, you wanted to know proofs, which is essentially the only thing that's different between all of these, besides the barrel type. So the sample number 1 is 152 proof. They're all pretty close. Yeah. Sample number 2 is 153, so it went up a little bit. Sample number 3 is 147, and sample number 4 is also 147.
So these are all up there proof-wise.
Yeah, they're all.
They don't drink that hot for the most part.
No, and so so to be clear, because like I usually think in terms of percent ABV, 140 proof is 70% ABV.
Mm-hmm.
That is hazmat. All of these samples are hazmat. And you haven't seen a grimace from either of us. Like, I forgot they're that high. I thought they were mid 60s.
Mm-hmm. So, continuing our speed run, the 4th sample, 505. On the nose, I get much more like woodiness and char, and this feels the most like it's had time in a barrel in a way that I have difficulty putting into words, but it's sort of an oakiness and a wood presence that you don't really get on younger whiskeys.
This palate, one. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, sure. This one tastes the most like American whiskey to me. It tastes the most like what you'd expect, say, a bourbon or a rye or a malt whiskey to taste like. I think it's not too much of a stretch to say this tastes fairly similar to what the Woodford malt whiskey kind of tastes like to me.
Yeah.
To be fair, it's been a long time since I've had the Woodford malt whiskey. I think it's been about 3 years, maybe 4 years. And the last time I had it was at Seattle Cocktail Week. After I was friends with Joe, so it must have been early 2022.
And this one has the least amount of impact of that very definite hops presence. It's still there, but it is, I think, more balanced by the heavy oak.
Yeah. So that last one, I think, highlights that there's something volatile about that hop profile
Hmm.
that the barrel filters out the
Yes.
heavier char, and it didn't go away really at all between the heavy toast, the medium toast, and heavy toast. The char one tamped it down a bit. I think the char one is my favorite. I think it's the best balance. It's
Hmm.
the thing that feels the most like a unique product and also doesn't have its uniqueness in your face, right? It's balanced, and for a 13-year-old American whiskey, I would
Hmm.
expect it to be balanced with all those rough edges sort of taken down already. So that makes sense to me that that's the one I like the best. If I was going for like a nice older, um, if I'm not mistaken, barrel 505, the char number 3 one,
Hmm.
was selected by our bourbon barrel pick program.
Okay.
So this was actually one of theirs ultimately. Ryan sent me this sample while he was shopping the barrel around.
Hmm.
But yeah, this is one of the ones that aficionados, not aficionados, I mean aficionados and our bourbon are like pretty close to the same group of people. But yeah, the our bourbon program picked this cask. So if you know anything about the our bourbon program and the people who do the picks for them, Jay West and associates, they have really good palates, right?
Yes.
That tells you a lot about the quality of these products. And the fact that Phil and I don't think that this is our favorite of the samples is also not surprising to me because we know that Jay West leans more towards a bourbon profile,
Yeah.
whereas we lean more towards a Scotch profile. So the fact that we're sort of aiming away from that bourbony profile doesn't surprise me, and doesn't discount the fact that this is a very good product. Just if we were going to pick one of these, I think it would not be this one. I think it would be most likely char number 1 if I
Yeah.
yeah, this the third sample.
Sample number 3.
Yeah, most likely char number 1, possibly the heavy toast.
So one of the things that I find interesting about those four in particular is the fact that they are 13 years old. And I think that may have something to do with how easily they drink at their proof, because those are all, um, you take that glass with its vapors in it and you light a match over it and you are going to have a fire.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks for reminding me not to do that. Not that I would ever.
no, but it's something that you forget about because so a little bit of dumb whiskey knowledge for you all. At roughly 50% alcohol by volume, or I think it's more like 55, 55, 57, somewhere along there. If you soak a piece of paper or other flammable item in it, it will burn, and you know, but it won't burn independently. Starting
Your mic cut out. It did the thing again. Just give it 5 seconds.
know when I'm back.
Yes, you're back.
All right. So starting,
Gremlins.
I don't know where I was. At about 55 to 57%, if you soak something that is itself volatile or flammable, it will burn. For example, the term proof comes from showing proof that the rum was good by soaking gunpowder in rum and lighting it. If it lit, it was above 57%, and it was good. Um, at around 60%, you start to get into the area where on particularly hot days, you can get volatile fumes that are enough to potentially burn. At 70%, you are talking about something that will independently, if you hold a match to it, burn, which means that the ethanol is at a high enough concentration that it does not need something else to provide the fuel to burn.
I did not know that distinction. I knew about I think it's 57% proof.
Yep.
Is imperial proof. 100 imperial proof is 57% alcohol. That's the Navy test, the proof test. I didn't know about that. The spontaneous or not spontaneous. God help us if alcohol spontaneously
Oh,
combusted.
God.
Because I'm surrounded by bombs. Um, do I have to censor that again? I'm thinking too much about
Oh.
censorship now. Um, But yeah,
Deadly.
that think about if you're making like a what's the thing where you flambe the bananas Foster, right? You
Mhm.
put overproof rum in there and you light a match to it, or you hold it over your gas stove to light it on fire. That's how you get the flambe, right? Because that 151 proof is enough to burn. I mean, in that case, you've also got the sugar to burn, but I'm not sure if that's flammable enough to burn.
Sugar is weird because in like so many things, if you get a fine enough powder of sugar and enough suspended in air, it will burn. Just like printer toner powder or
Just like
flour.
grain dust.
Yeah. But sugar has the added interesting, horrifying bonus of it gets sticky.
Mm-hmm.
So it sticks to surfaces while it's on fire.
Yep. Confectioner's napalm.
Yep. It is not fun. It's why candy making is more dangerous than you would expect because you're dealing with essentially liquid sugar, which
Yeah,
is
that
sticky.
makes a lot of sense.
Sorry, I've distracted us. Shall we
No,
move?
no, no. That's I love the sidebars. We got about 20 minutes left.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start pouring the other three. I have them in these fancy little flasks. This time.
Ooh.
There's also less information with these. We'll go back through and like do like a comparison of tasting notes on the first set, I think, because
Mhm.
we sort of got side railed from that. It's hard to like stick to tasting notes when you're reviewing things verbally.
Yeah.
These will never make good videos because we don't stay focused enough. Little short videos, I mean.
I
Okay,
mean,
so the
I try.
second set that we have are all 7 years, 7 months old. So we have a more precise age. They are 88% malted barley and 12% malted rye. And the 3 barrels that we have are medium toast, heavy toast, and char number 3. So in this case, we don't have a char number 1. That'll be kind of interesting to compare. Their proof levels are give or take 147. I'll tell you the exact ones when we get to them.
Mhm.
So yeah, slightly different mash bill. We've got more malted barley in these than in the first set. They are younger. They are also just, I mean, you probably expected this already because of the earlier discussion, but they are also all hopped whiskey.
Mhm. So, simple number one, just sort of firing from the hip. The the hop note is much more predominant. It is it is also hotter feeling in the mouth, which isn't surprising. Um, Still remarkably easy drinking for being hazmat, but it is a little bit hot. It's got um, less of that like caramelized sugars and like confectionery notes and more of the grain character, I think, because there's that mintiness that's sort of hiding behind that hop note, um, and a little bit of like herbalness to it. But
Yeah, okay. So that reminds me, there was I don't know if I quite made this point quite as clearly as I wanted to. What I would really like for hopped whiskey of any category is that just like peat, and like you don't have to disclose peat in Scotland, and I don't think you should have to, right? But everybody kind of knows it's a public fact that this thing is a peated whiskey. And I think as people's palates become acclimated to hopped whiskey, it will also become a thing where people just know it's a hopped whiskey. I think it's a distinct enough flavor profile. Uh, Raymond took an inflammatory stance on this where he said, uh, and I'm sharing this because I think this is a valid perspective. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think it's a valid perspective that hopped whiskey, because of the non-disclosure, is potentially harmful to the category of American single malt whiskey. Hopped American single malt specifically is potentially harmful to the category of American single malt whiskey because it's the sort of thing that you either love it or you hate it as a flavor, just the way that people love or hate IPAs, right?
for the record, I particularly strongly dislike IPAs.
And you're
Giving you
okay with this
beer is
flavor
what gets my
profile?
heart.
So
I
it's not
mean,
necessarily like if you don't like IPA, you might still like this. I mean, it's a
I mean,
slightly different thing. There's elements that are in
it
common.
is slightly different. It's also like I'm I'm choosing to view it as a type of flavor that I may not be acclimated to yet. I'm not the
Just
biggest
like Pete,
fan.
the first time you tried
Yeah.
Pete.
Although I'm again not the best example for that because my first real proper single malt Scotch was Ardbeg 10, and I fell in love immediately. So,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
every time I say
So
that, I
yeah, the point that I want to make is that I think it is absolutely essential, no matter what else happens in the regulations for this sort of thing, whether it's allowed or not, whether it becomes a different type of whiskey or not, whether they make it all DSS or not, and what they let you put whiskey on, regardless of anything that happens along those lines, I think that it needs to be disclosed. It needs to be made transparent somewhere. Maybe not on the bottle, maybe just on the website. I think they should be marketing on the basis of
yeah.
you like beer, you're going to like this hopped whiskey, but it's a hopped whiskey, just like you would say a peated whiskey. I think that's a really important categorical schism in flavor,
Mhm.
line in the road. It
And
matters and it needs to be disclosed.
I would also like to point out that while none of my Highland Parks note specifically that they are peated, I can't move this one because it's got stuff on top of it. But my Bunnahabhain Stoisha, the Lafroig, the Port Charlotte, the Ardbeg, and the Longrow that I have way up there all note specifically that they are heavily peated.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
Does the long row say just peated or heavily peated? Because the one I had yesterday said just peated.
I think it may just say peated, but it is interesting to note that those all
Yeah.
identify themselves as being peated.
Now, likewise, the Springbank doesn't say peated, but it's well known that there's some quantity of peat in this, less than long row, more than nothing. And it's that well-known aspect, right? Like
Mhm.
it's not just people guessing for the most part. Like Glenfiddich, maybe a guess. I believe they've said to like on tours, they'll say that there's a small amount of peat in some of the barley that they use. So like it's a texture thing, right?
Yeah.
I think you might even argue that like something along the lines of like a gentle beer cask finish could apply that same just a hint of hop flavor, right?
Mhm.
But I think just like Pete, and honestly, just like sherry, right? Like if you've got a sherried scotch, they want to market on that basis, and people know that a sherried scotch tastes a certain way. And if it's not sherried, I don't like it as much. Or if it is sherried, I don't like it as much, right?
Mhm.
Opinions vary, right? Sherry is a thing that people want to market on because it's expensive, and hops are expensive too, right? It's a flavor that is really distinct, that is worth marketing on, and it's good. You can get away with a single unit sale to any sucker who walks into the store.
Mhm.
You can convince them it's a good thing and they'll try it. And if they don't like it, they'll never try it again. But what you did was you, the store owner or whoever made the recommendation for the whiskey that didn't disclose this key element of flavor profile, tarnished your ability to make recommendations to that customer. So you potentially lost out on future sales. You definitely didn't get more sales on the same brand.
Right.
Disclosing these potentially polarizing flavor profiles is in the interest of the producer, is in the interest of the liquor store, is in the interest of the bar.
Mhm.
So not only do I think it should be disclosed from a regulatory standpoint, I think it should be disclosed from a regulatory standpoint. In this particular case, I think there's a case to be made. Maybe I don't have a very firm argument for this, but I think there's a case to be made that it should be required by legal regulation that the inclusion of hops in the wash pre-distillation needs to be disclosed in the same way as added hop flavor needs to be disclosed. You don't have to disclose your barrel finishes, but you're probably gonna. because barrels are expensive, especially expensive barrels, right? like stuff that they put an IPA in and released as a small batch, whatever. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, that's more than enough of that soapbox. Let's talk about the flavor differences in these three.
Back on the rails. So the
Yeah.
heavy toast is where I think that of these three, it starts to get more into the territory that I enjoy.
Okay.
The heavy toast has more of the wood sugars. It is again that like darker caramelization of the wood sugars, so you get more of that like dark, slightly bitter caramel note. Not really burnt sugar, but getting close to it. And I think that does a lot to offset some of the hop note. I think this is where you start to get more barrel and less grain influence. And number
I'm getting a
three,
hint of lavender from the heavy toast, the second sample in this set that I didn't get in any of the other ones.
you know what? Now that you say that, yeah, but that might be power suggestion on my part.
It wasn't for me. Also, back on number one, I would say yes. I mean, it's clear it's a different mash bill. It's probably a different beer, probably different hops. So the fact that the hop profile is different,
Mm-hmm.
um, but the style of hops I'm getting in this is less aggressive than the style of hops I was getting in the first set.
Right. This is more of a gentle sort of cajoling hop flavor, more
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
herbal and less of the potency.
It's a little bit, it's honey and like, I want to say piney, but like not really.
Like fresh cut vegetation.
Yeah,
Particularly
like a sappy twig or something.
yeah. Number
Okay.
3 out of this set is simultaneously my favorite and least favorite.
Huh, interesting. Okay.
So on the nose, it is, you could almost mistake it for bourbon.
Yes.
I don't,
Very light, surprisingly light considering hazmat.
right. But like, you know, this one brings to mind, like makes me think of a couple of the Heaven Hill bourbons that I've enjoyed in the past. Which
Interesting.
I know is not accurate to either the Heaven Hill profile or this profile, but it's just sort of a connection that, you know, pinged in the back of my head.
And just after pinged in the back of your head, your mic went out again. Just give it 10 seconds.
I'm bad. Sorry.
You're back.
I don't know why
You're back.
the internet does that.
I don't know. It's very strange. I've never had hardware do that before. And it's been happening it's been happening consistently at a fairly regular interval since like 6 months ago.
Yep. So, and I've updated the drivers, so I don't know what to do next, except for maybe build a whole new PC. And I have a friend who might be willing to help me with that. No,
New interface, new cables. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I've changed all of the cables that I use, and I guess I could buy another interface. I've been meaning to upgrade, but that's more of a more inputs sort of upgrade.
You said you fixed the USB-C port on your thing?
I replaced the USB cable.
Okay.
I fixed the USB port on my phone because it.
That's even riskier.
Oh well, yeah, but what it was the little pin in the middle was.
Oh, yep.
So.
Yeah. Okay. That's I've been worried about that happening with USB-C because it seems like a real good way for it to just fail.
Oh yeah.
Anyway. Is that the remind me that I need to go soon?
Yes. that is we've hit the 1 hour mark, which
Okay.
means I'm going to close out my thoughts on sample number 3 of this set, which
Okay.
is that the flavor profile is so much stronger on the like wood impact and the char, and it loses a lot of the grain flavor, and it just sort of it gives me less interesting flavors. And for me, interesting is more important than potentially a lot of other things. Which,
Yeah, I agree. It is simultaneously more bourbony and yet also somehow more piney. That pine but not pine thing in the other samples, this one is definitely pine. So weirdly, somehow it got stronger in this one, which is quite strange because it's all the same distillate, same day, same except for barrels being different.
it's just southern
Anomaly.
yellow pine.
Yeah. Okay. There is one more interesting thing we can do with this set. If you still have all 7 glasses,
Yep.
the medium toasts and the heavy toast and the char number 3s, we can compare to each other. And on the one hand, you could expect that this is going to be the difference pairwise is going to be roughly the same, but it'll be interesting if it's not.
I was going to say we should do our usual blend all of it together and see what comes out.
Man, let's do this thing first, then let's do that.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Medium toast.
Yeah, okay. So you get a lot more of that old wood character, even going back to so now going from 7 to 13 years. So we're going from the younger to the older now. Different mash bill, sure, but close enough. You get a lot more of that like grain whiskey old wood or like bourbon old wood. It's 13-year-old American whiskey.
Yeah.
It's been aging for a while. It's well aged. It's nicely integrated. It's got this like wood paneled room,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of like well-worn loungy
Yeah.
lounge vibe. I won't say like cigar lounge because there's nothing tobacco about this to me.
No. Which is almost surprising because that's one of the notes that really comes out on old American
Yeah.
whiskey.
But I wonder if we jump right on over to the char number 3.
Yes.
I don't know, surprisingly soft, actually. Just overall surprisingly soft. It's got that old wood and not a lot else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's check the char number 1. Nope, I'm getting like no tobacco here. It's just like old wood and a little bit of that hoppy stuff.
Yeah.
If I was going to dig in on flavor notes on any particular one of these, it would be the char number 1 because it's my favorite. I think we get a little bit of marzipan here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
Brandy cherries or bourbon cherries.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like there's a cherry in here, but it's like it's not like a maraschino cherry. It's like a candied real cherry, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So okay, we're getting a lot of fur all here. That's interesting. What is that? It's something I'm trying to remember. Like this reminds me of a candy, some specific candy.
So, have you ever used like like camphor oil for like rust prevention on tools?
Nope. I'm not
Okay.
much of a tool worker.
That's fair. That's fair.
But okay, so camphor oil is a smell I should go learn. Okay, if you swirl it, it'll tickle your nose. Hazmat.
Well, I'm just looking at the time. It is at our cutoff.
Yep. I'm gonna give it like we'll go into our wrap up, but like I'm not like gonna rush out of here on the dot at 6:30. But
Right. I want to make sure that you're keeping
Yep.
to time.
Yep, I'm keeping an eye on it. Okay, yeah. So like I was expecting to get more notes out of this, but like I don't that's not always a bad thing to like only get like 4 or 5 good notes out of a whiskey. Like you could really like a whiskey.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even say it's not complex. It's just that like what it has is screaming at you in like a good way. It's that hop profile and it's that wood profile and it's that cherry profile and like those are all good things and they're playing together really nicely in this char number 1 example.
Mhm.
I don't need to have 20 tasting notes. I think I'm good there. Let's
Yeah.
call it a good whiskey and move on. Okay, so let's do the let's do the pairwise comparison. Okay, so molasses. I'm getting molasses from the medium toast 13-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that.
Didn't get that
I
before.
smell that.
On the palate, it is so hoppy.
Yeah. I think that the medium toast is where the hop comes through the most. And I
Mhm.
don't necessarily think it's a detriment, but I don't think it is. I really don't think it's a flavor for me personally.
Mhm.
I
Except for
don't
that Mountain
get
Meadow,
it.
though.
I see that's the thing in Mountain Meadow. It seemed like, and this isn't a dig at River Roots by any means, but I felt like in Mountain Meadows it was incorporated so well into the presentation as a whole that it was just an element of that like bursting wildflowers and honey and like earthiness that it just sort of was so well integrated that it didn't stand out as much.
Right. So rather than it being hops and it was like this has a flavor profile and the hops are a part of it. Once you realize it's hops, okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Going back to the 7-year from the 13-year, I got something interesting, but I lost it. Oh, cedar and maple syrup.
Okay. I can definitely I definitely get the cedar.
The maple syrup is like just a touch, but mostly cedar. And the molasses on the 13-year is actually like I like that a lot. I actually
Yeah.
now that I've found that note, I miss it in the char number 1. Okay. I'm gonna move to the heavy toast pairwise.
Mhm.
Yeah, the hops have come down. This is warmer. It feels very inviting, this one. The 13-year-old heavy toast barrel.
Mhm.
But aside from that, like general vibe of being warm and welcoming, I'm not getting a lot from it.
Yeah, I feel like the heavy toast is sort of a less inspiring middle ground, honestly, than the number one char.
Yeah.
Like
Like it gives you
it's
more wood sugars, but it doesn't do any of the other things you expect oak to do.
mhm.
It's
And
covered
again,
up the
still very
distillate
good, but
enough. Sorry, go ahead.
it's still very good whiskey. It's just not as
Yeah, compared to the other ones, there's not much to say about it. It's warm and inviting, and I don't want to say flat even. It's just warm and inviting. That's what that is as a whiskey. The 7-year one is again hops in your face on the heavy toast
mhm.
and very tannic. So unlike the medium toast 7-year, which is yeah, that tastes like a distilled IPA. The heavy
Yeah.
toast is very tannic.
Hmm.
So between them, I think I like the 13-year heavy toast, but I wouldn't reach for this given the other options. Yeah.
No.
Okay. So, and finally, our char number 3 pairwise 7-year, 13-year. I'm going to start with the 13-year.
I'll start on the opposite end because
Sure, why not?
see if there's a good through line.
Ooh, fudge brownies.
See, that complexity is really missing out of the 7-year because that the cocoa notes are complex, more complex note.
Welcome in, Carrie. Good to see you. Hey, hey.
Hello.
Put that on stream for the roll call. Yeah, the hops are gone. Okay, I'm going to move to the other one. I need the contrast. Okay, so hops on the 7-year, but like not overwhelming. This is lovely dead air, right? We're just tasting things right now.
I'm I'm trying to place a note that I got on the 13-year off of going from the 7-year 7 months to the 13-year that I can't quite put my finger on. It's I don't think I'm getting the fudge brownies, but I'm definitely getting like sort of the like Dutch processed cocoa powder sort of like cocoa notes, but not real sweet, if you know what I
coming
mean.
back to it, it's less brownie, more fudge, but it's very subtle. Yeah, just lip smacks. You know, that's a Carrie. You want to do a fun edit for us?
Oh no. No, please no. I'm already self-conscious because I'm using a mic without a pop filter tonight.
We've been doing this long enough. Please no. Yeah, we've been doing this for long enough that we probably need to have a plug-in to remove that specifically. Yeah, that's good. We need that. I'm sure that whenever we get to tasting, probably offends certain people with misophonia. I actually, I love Single Cask Nation, but there comes a point in every episode where they're both smacking, and I'm just like, just white knuckling my way through that part of the episode. The One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. Yeah.
Oh, I won't name names. There's a reviewer whose videos people used to be like, "Oh, you should watch this guy's videos." And about a minute and a half into all of his videos, I had to turn it off because I couldn't.
All right, I'm gonna officially. I'm gonna do the Tazon Day, breathe away from the mic thing. Yeah, that's true, right? There's a whole audience in ASMR that we are not tapping into because that is a weird vibe. I got to tell you, that is a weird vibe. Like, I get it, but I also think it's a weird vibe.
I mean, there's like some ASMR stuff that's just like noises, and then there's some that like put shivers down my spine, not in the like ooh reaction to ASMR way, but the why would you
when
do
it's
that? Way?
when it's like objects sliding around, like when it's like food prep silently and it's just like the ingredients moving around, I'm good with that. Excuse me. That feels good. Or like Yeah, the burps are definitely not something we want to keep on the stream. Yeah, ASM registered trademark.
I
um,
hate to harp, but we are 10
yeah,
minutes
yeah.
past.
This is we are getting to my time officially. Do we want to do the? We're not going to say the S word either. I need to think about censorship. Do we want to do the thing where we blend all of these things together?
I'm already starting.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna put it in the whiskey lodge glass so we can do the sign off with the whiskey lodge. One of these days, we're gonna have to do that thing that Nora told us about, where the thing you add to the blend last dominates, and just like try that out as an experiment. So what I'm gonna try to do here is add my favorite to the blend last, assuming that that works. So char number 1 goes into the blend last. See, when we're talking about one brand, uh, we can say favorites.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been shy about saying that Catoctin Creek is my favorite.
Yep. Yeah. So for anyone who didn't catch the beginning and is catching the end now, we are making plans to interview Balcones, which is going through the Diageo PR machine, and which is a fun experience. It's weird. It's a weird vibe. Most craft American single malt will just talk to you, but once corporate gets involved, it's a different thing. We are making plans to have Joseph O'Sullivan with Minden Mill on to talk to us free and unfettered of the PR machine, because they've given him a little bit more leash, which is a lot of fun. I won't say we get wild with Joe, but I like when we have Joe's full personality that is not being filtered through concern for the company line.
We need to get Joe to give his opinions on French toast.
Oh yes. And then do a compilation of Joe and Caitlin talking about French toast. So Minden we haven't scheduled yet, but it's probably gonna be I'm trying to only do 2 episodes a month now, like 2 or 3, just to like make it more sustainable. So Cedar Ridge, I think we're gonna have next week or the week after. Yeah, we haven't booked it, but like we talked about end of February. So I think we're doing next week or the week after for Cedar Ridge. Stranahan's we're talking to. Minden Mill we're probably going to plan for late March, I think. Catoctin Creek, I think we're probably going to aim for mid to late March as well, because Catoctin Creek is making an American single malt now. So if Finch, oh, they have it. It's you have your hands on it, my dude.
Yes.
I didn't. Okay, cool.
I
I didn't know
ordered
you
it.
could get it yet. I thought it was like early enough that but you live in Virginia, so of course you can get it. Okay, cool. So we're aiming for mid to late March for Catoctin Creek, because they have an American single malt now, which is super exciting because we've wanted to have an excuse to talk to Catoctin Creek, and now we do. And we're going to talk about the rye too, because Phil loves the rye, and I can't not let him talk about the rye. So that's going to happen too. There's a whole list. I need to put together a list of people that we're like talking to and planning to like a schedule together. Like, full disclosure, I don't have anything firmly scheduled past this date. I needed a break, so we just didn't schedule anything after the River Roots interview. But we have people we're talking to. So yeah, Stranahan's, Balcones, Catoctin Creek, Minden Mill. I think those are the only people that I have in the loop right now. I want to talk to Erin Lee from Few about the Step Up program and Good Deeds, possibly in an appropriate themed month. But I'm not really. I'm more about the interesting people, the interesting stories, the good message than I am about fitting it into some like diversity boosting month or what, you know what I'm saying, right? Like I don't think it's I care less about the timing of those conversations and more about the content of those conversations.
Yeah.
But I see the value in the timing too.
All right.
This has had enough time to bake, and it's time for us to sign off. And I just saw my wife joined the Instagram live, so she's probably thinking about coming to grab me. Uh,
Drag him away like a Mortal Kombat fatality.
yeah, something like that. Okay. This is something emergent. I'm getting complexity that wasn't necessarily it's balanced well. I did the mix of the 3 River Roots when I had Ryan on, and he gave me the same funny look that that Amanda Beckwith gives us, which is always fun. That would be a fun compilation. People's reactions when we tell them we're going to blend their whiskey together with no plan.
I'm going to say for the first time, I think I actually really like this final blend. Like, I genuinely think that this does a good job of balancing a lot of the less balanced elements of the individual whiskeys, which are imbalanced in interesting and good ways. But this, I think, makes for something that does a really good job of striking a middle ground, which is weird, because usually this is terrible.
Yeah, and usually it comes out worse than the sum of its parts.
And I'm not saying that this is better than the sum of its parts. I'm thinking that this is probably sort of
It's different. It's different, and it's a thing. It's likable, right?
Mhm.
Yours seems darker than mine. Yours seems more in the mahogany direction, and mine is more in the.
I also have more in my glass because I poured the last couple a little bit heavy.
Okay, fair enough.
Let's see if I can get this.
Okay, tasting notes real quick. Are the hops in this? Yes, but more integrated. The way that Mountain Meadow is integrated, I would say. Like, it's part of the profile. I think I'm still getting the cherries. I'm still getting the honey. I'm still getting the old wood.
And the like caramel, like dark, not burnt, but dark caramel.
Mm-hmm. I think the chocolate is gone. The chocolate was really only in one of the samples. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Is the molasses still here?
I think a little bit.
Yeah. This is giving me pecan pie vibes a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But like a cedary version. The cedar's there too. The cedary version of pecan pie.
So typically we end up with totally different end blends with very little commonality because of different ratios and whatnot. Somehow this has made a blend for both of us that we find common notes in, which is unsurprising, but also interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so with no further ado, I have to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's been great hanging out with you, Phil. I'm glad that we did this tasting. It's good to do these things when we don't necessarily have the running commentary of the producer. So maybe we should do this more often. If you guys liked this and you want to see more of this kind of thing in isolation of the producers, and you want to just get our unfiltered opinions on what we're drinking, let us know in the comments. Remember to like, subscribe, share with your friends. We do this because we love it, not because we're trying to make any profit off of it. But if you want to help support us, you can buy our merch, which includes the pens and includes these Glencairns. There's a form in the description. And besides that, really the best thing you can do to help us grow is to just like, subscribe, and share. Help us with that algorithm stuff. So, Phil, until next time, I'll see you in the lodge.
Sláinte.
Cheers.